Anthropic just passed OpenAI. Today, Bloomberg confirmed a $30 billion round at a $900 billion valuation. The Times put the round at $50 billion at 950. Either number makes Anthropic bigger than OpenAI, the most valuable private company in the world. We cover the round, the revenue curve, the cap table question, and the IPO countdown. Bloomberg ran the confirmation on May 12th. Anthropic is in talks for a $30 billion round at a $900 billion valuation. The New York Times followed days later. The round could reach $50 billion. The valuation could reach $950 billion. Either number is the largest private funding event in technology history. Bloomberg's framing is unhedged. Anthropic. $30 billion, $900 billion valuation. The article cites sources familiar with the discussions. The terms are not final. The conversation is real. $950 billion. That is the upper bound the New York Times reported. To put that in context, OpenAI's most recent valuation was $825 billion. Anthropic just passed it by more than $100 billion. For the first time in the history of the company. Sherwood News led with the comparison directly in the headline. Anthropic in talks for funding at a valuation as high as $950 billion, which would make it bigger than OpenAI. The order at the top of the AI market just reversed, and the markets have not fully repriced yet. Read what this means for the narrative. For 2 years, the AI industry has been told as an OpenAI story, with Anthropic as the safety-conscious challenger. As of this week, the order is reversed at the valuation layer. The most valuable AI lab in the world is no longer the one most people are talking about. Pull back to the math, valuations are downstream of revenue, and Anthropic's revenue curve is the story behind the story. The numbers are public. They are also unprecedented in software history. Trading Key ran the full revenue breakdown. End of 2025, $9 billion annualized. By March 2026, $30 billion. By the May Dev Day, $44 billion. Read those three numbers. That is roughly 5x in 5 months. Nothing in the history of software grew that fast at that scale. $44 billion annualized. At the Dev Day this month, Dario Amodei disclosed the number on stage. That puts Anthropic ahead of every enterprise software company that does not start with the word Microsoft, and the curve is still steepening. And the margin number is the part nobody is writing about enough. A year ago, gross margin on inference was 38%. As of this Dev Day, it is over 70%. That is not a growth story, that is a unit economics story. Anthropic solved the cost of goods problem that everyone said would take 5 years. PYMNTS compiled the adoption side. Anthropic business adoption is up 4x year over year. OpenAI business adoption is up 0.3%. That is not a typo. The lab that ships restricted access frontier models for cyber. The lab that just absorbed the legal vertical. The lab that signed $200 billion to Google is the lab winning enterprise. Pull back further to the question every public markets investor will ask twice: who actually owns Anthropic? Google pledged up to $40 billion in April. Amazon committed up to $25 billion earlier. Add the new $30 to $50 billion private round. The cap table is starting to look less like a startup and more like a joint venture between two hyperscalers and a Wall Street syndicate. Read the structure. Anthropic's largest customers are also its largest investors. The same circular financing concern that surfaced around Nvidia's $40 billion stake in OpenAI applies here too, with one important difference. The Google and Amazon checks are not just equity. They are pre-purchased compute. The line between funding and contract just blurred. TechCrunch sources frame the $50 billion round as something specific. The final private fundraise. The next event after this is the IPO roadshow. The target window, October 2026. If the round closes at the high end and the IPO opens at a similar multiple, the public markets debut would land in the top 3 largest tech IPOs in US history. Pull all of it together, Anthropic at end of 2025 was a $9 billion revenue company. By the time the IPO bell rings in October, it will be a $1 trillion company. Read the timescale of that sentence, 15 months, from single-digit billions in revenue to a $1 trillion public markets debut. That has never happened in any industry in modern financial history. 15 months, the fastest path from 9 figures in revenue to $1 trillion public valuation ever by any company in any industry. That is not a marketing line. That is the audit of the cap table and the IPO calendar. Builder takeaway: the lab winning enterprise is winning the valuation. The lab winning the headlines is not. If you are building anything that touches frontier AI, the strategic question this week is which lab to build on. Anthropic is now the more expensive one to compete with and the more valuable one to integrate. 3 things to watch over the next 90 days. 1. Whether the round closes at 950 or settles at 900. 2. Whether Microsoft increases its OpenAI position to counter. 3. Whether the SEC opens a comment file on the circular structure before the IPO filing. All 3 move the entire AI capital stack. Anthropic just became the most valuable private company in the world, $9 billion to $950 billion in 15 months. If this matters to you, the subscribe button is right here. Watch next our breakdown of how Anthropic just came for big law. For ANN Live, this is AI News Now, proof, not press releases.